All right, we are live. We have Emma back. After the podcast live, it's an opportunity for us to basically touch base with the interviewee. You're the interviewee, right? I'm the interviewer.
Yes, that's
And
correct.
just if there's a few things that we're still kind of left hanging out there, or as my YouTube channel grows, and people were to start following and actually join a live or whatever, they could ask some questions. But for me, I
Yeah,
don't get hung up too much on the lives in the sense that it's all kind of content that we can chop up
yeah,
and put out there later on. Plus, it's kind of fun, and I enjoy sitting down and talking to you.
yeah. I enjoy talking to you too.
So, do you feel after the podcast, which was 3 weeks ago when we actually sat down and
Yeah, I think
recorded it, wasn't it?
so.
Does it
Yeah.
seem like it's just like you don't even remember what we talked about, or
I only remember because I've been watching your little snippets, the stuff you shared on
yeah?
Instagram. But yeah,
That's I
I
like
am
doing
this.
that, but
Sorry.
it's so hard to figure out. And again, it's probably something that I'll have to ask you here on the live in your on your thoughts on how to chop things up like that. Like, am I going down the right path as a guy who's doing what I'm doing as far as I'm starting a podcast. I'm wanting to get stuff out there. I want to get my YouTube game up and out there and get noticed.
Yeah.
The clips. What would be some suggestions you would have for me as somebody that has to go back and edit through
Yeah.
an hour and a half worth of podcast content?
Yeah. So I don't work with podcasts, but I listen to them and I watch them. And so I can tell you my opinion as a viewer, but also from a content creator background.
Please.
Um, so a couple of my favorite podcasts in terms of like how they do things and some of the content that they share or talk about. Obviously, crap, I can't remember the name of it, but the one with the Kelsey brothers, right?
Oh, I
Um,
love. Did you see the clip of them talking about their mom after the Super
yeah,
Bowl and they're
I
both
haven't watched that
crying?
yet.
Oh,
Not
you
yet.
haven't? I'm sorry.
No. But hit so theirs and the Joe Rogan experience,
Uh,
say what you will about, whatever his stance is on things, but I like how he does things and how he promotes, or I guess both of them do, how they promote their podcast.
sure.
And so, and you'll see like they share like, and I don't think Joe Rogan does this, but I know the Kelsey brothers do. So they'll publish the whole podcast,
Hmm.
video form as well, onto their YouTube platform and of all of the podcasting platforms as well. But they're always promoting, with the shorts or whatever, the snippets of whatever those podcasts are. And I love how they put those together. They like kind of create interest and all of that. And so if I were to model, so if I were to do a podcast,
Yes.
I would use those two podcasts as a guide,
Hmm.
for how to uh, publish it, how to create one, but also kind of how to promote it, utilizing some of those tools that exist, at our, like short YouTube shorts and reels and
Right.
TikToks. So yeah, if I were to do that from like right now, that's what I would do.
It's on those kind of podcasts, and and this is why, on top of the specific answers that you give, I'm also interested in how you kind of think in terms of guiding somebody like myself who's wanting to step into the podcast arena and to figure out how to get some traction on it, because I mean, look, I do understand that it's going to take a long time
Hmm.
to hang in there and to have virtually very, very few people listen or whatever, but I'm having so much fun doing this.
Yeah,
It is very time consuming, which you've
yeah.
mentioned, just doing the YouTube stuff, and we're going to get into a few things there. And I've got some questions prepared from Amanda, who
Oh,
before
nice.
she left for her carpool thing today, she was like, "I've got some questions for you guys." I was like, "Oh," and I was thinking like it's a question. And there was like six of them. which is great though, because
That's
we may
awesome.
not get
No,
any
that's
other
great.
ones.
Yeah.
But to look and see the people that are at the forefront, the ones that have success in the genre, in podcasting, that's a
Hmm.
good idea. And it's kind of funny because I always, I grew up on Howard Stern.
Yeah.
Okay. And obviously, he's another one to where you're like, you either find people that absolutely
Hmm.
love him or they hate him. But there's no doubt that he has blazed the trail in what he does in talk radio and however he has changed over the years and how he's, you know, a lot of people, a lot of DJs, a lot of radio personalities just copy the blueprint that he has.
Hmm.
And Rogan's another one to where people, and it's funny, you did the exact same thing that other people have suggested to me when they found out I was doing a podcast. They're like, "Oh, well, you must be a Joe Rogan fan, and or do you listen to Joe Rogan?" And I'm like, I don't have for him. It doesn't matter to me. I'm interested in how he does some things like the arena. He brings people from all over the place in to converse about whatever it is, and you're bound to find people he brings in that you're going to like, that you don't like. You're bound to agree, disagree with things that he says or whatever he believes in or whatever. But he obviously creates the circus that a lot of people come in and watch, and he's making a lot of money doing it. So
Yeah. And it's also important to know, like these guys, the Kelsey brothers, you got Joe Rogan, you mentioned Howard Stern, like these are names, these are like household names, right? And so you're Brian, right? Who
yeah,
know nobody knows who Brian is, like in compared to these personalities, right? And so you're having to do things a little differently, and so it might take a little time or a lot of time, to build your audience and to build that kind of following. But at the same time, there's no reason that you can't use the methodologies that they are, or adopting those methodologies to grow your viewership. And so it's kind of one of those things we talk about actually quite a bit in content creating, or amongst content creator circles, is kind of like fake it till you make it, right?
right.
So there's no reason that you can't use those same techniques to grow your audience. And,
But there's a skill in being able to dissect what they're doing. Like
yes.
I would love, like I see you now as almost a coach, which kind of sounds like when you guys all get together in your little content creator meeting powwow thing, you guys are able to kind of break down some things and share information, everything. I love the idea of that. And sometimes it's hard for us. I'll speak in terms of me. It's hard for me to sit down and analyze something that I'm so close to because it's my personal project, and to say, okay, well, what makes a Joe Rogan or Howard Stern or the Kelsey brothers, what makes those radio shows or podcasts successful? And I think about, well, I know why I'm there and I tune in for certain things, but then to break that down into, okay, well, then do that with what I'm doing. I'm like, oh, but I can't. It's too much information. And I almost need somebody like you that it just seems like you're able to pick up on the different things. Like you could help people figure it out.
I appreciate that. I think um, it's easier, like like you were just saying, it is a lot easier to look at what someone else is doing and kind of using some of the things that I've learned along the way to help give advice or to maybe help you out. But it is harder to do those things for yourself.
Right.
But again, I think we talked about it in the podcast, with my background in art, like I learned in that setting how to take that feedback and those learnings and actually use them and apply them. But a lot of it too is, also played sports. We were just talking about you having to do hockey later. Well, sports are the same way. You're learning constantly what works
Yeah.
and what doesn't work, right? And the things that are working, you keep doing those things, and the things that aren't, like, you do away with those things. And so, or you try to figure out how to do those better. And so this is no different. I mean, it's just a different application, obviously, but a lot of those same mindsets, or the way that you approach things, is going to be the same. So
Well, and I wonder if, I think you mentioned your daughter does cheer
mhm.
competition, my son does hockey, and I'm sure both of them have times within practices or meetings that they have to go over video, and the reason they go over video is to see things from a different perspective, to analyze, to see what works, what doesn't work, what you're doing here.
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
and I
Yeah, and so my daughter actually comes from a gymnastics background. She used to be a competitive gymnast. And so from a very young age, from 6 years old, she's been able to kind of figure those things out. Gymnasts are on a whole other level than any other competitive athlete I've ever met. And so you've got like these 10, 11, 12-year-old girls that are, setting goals and able to make changes and adapt to things and fight through injuries, and, things that, would take down most normal people. And you got these kids that are just like, pushing through some of these things, doing some hard things. And it's like, they're able to look at what's working and what's not,
right,
and make changes. Like, if they see pictures or a video of their body doing a certain thing that's not supposed to be doing, they fix it. They know how to fix it. And so it's just being aware of what, being a body aware, basically. And
right.
they can make the changes and adapt. And so that's kind of translated over to what she's doing with cheer now, is they can watch video and she knows exactly what changes to make.
And that's what I'm trying to do, and I think others are trying to do with their social media accounts, is looking at successful accounts or people that kind of understand and can kind of see blueprints of what people are doing, and then take bits and pieces and try to apply it to what they're doing on their channel, and find out what works, what doesn't work, or what's enjoyable and works enough. I Talking about our kids real briefly, and I've got my notepad here that I'm going to write down. I want to have you back on for a different kind of podcast down the road, because I want to talk to you about being a sports parent, and
Okay.
specifically, you're coming from your background of being a collegiate athlete yourself. And I don't know if that's just a miserable experience as a kid to have a parent that has gone through it at a high level, because then that's like super pressure, or not, or does coming from a collegiate background and a high level, are you able to not be like that overbearing type parent? Don't answer. This isn't a question for you now, because we're going to get onto a tangent and not talk about the social media stuff, but that is what I want to talk to you about if you're up for it down the road.
Yeah, happy to talk about that. Yeah,
Oh,
always up for talking about sports. So
Oh, perfect. All right, so I'm going to write that down, and then that's going to be one of our episodes down the road. So I want to hit on some of these questions that
yeah, let's do it.
for sure, that uh, if you're watching now on live and you have a question for Emma, feel free to post it in the comment, and then we'll address it there. I'm going to start with a couple of them that Amanda had sent over, and these are actually really good ones that I still have. Like, these were kind of follow-up questions that I had as well. So let's take this first one here.
Cool.
Taking the creative outlet part out, do you feel the amount of time spent working on your YouTube content corresponds to any monetary compensation you make from YouTube?
Okay, so what I'm so basically, the time that you're putting in, is it
Take
are
out
you
the creative part, because you are a creative person, and sometimes
yeah,
we just do
yeah,
things as a creative that may not translate into any kind of monetary type thing.
yeah,
Take that part out of it.
yeah.
Is the amount of time that you're spending on your particular YouTube channel, does that correspond with the amount of money that you're making from YouTube?
No, not at the moment. The goal is obviously to increase that, but it's just one of those things that, especially like when you're starting out, when you're at a smaller, your channel's a smaller size, um, you have a lot more flexibility test um, to test things. And
Yeah.
so we talked about it a little bit, I think, in the podcast too. Is that you're able to kind of try and figure out what kind of content and how you want to present that content when you're at a smaller size. And so for me, coming from a background of like, I'm a web designer, but we do a lot of A/B testing. And so we're able to kind of throw things against the wall and see what works, right?
Explain A/B testing. I don't know
So
what that is.
A/B testing. So like we have a website or a web page and it looks a certain way, and we have data that backs up how that page is working. So we create a test page, a B test. So that's A, this is B. So we'll
Okay.
create a B test that's based off of that page. We'll make a few adjustments, but the page for the most part looks almost identical, but we make a few changes to it. And we roll those out at the same time. We show it to 50% of the audience, and then 50% audience gets B. And we track those numbers and then kind of see which ones are doing better. If B works better, A goes away and we push out B, and B becomes the new A. And so when I'm talking about like throwing things against the wall, those are also like strategic decisions based on data. So we're using data to make these decisions and to kind of figure out how we want to test things. And so YouTube is a lot like that, in that, like, I think we talked about too, like each video is like your opportunity to kind of like to really grow. And so YouTube kind of looks at each video individually and not everything as a whole. So each video, you're getting that opportunity to throw something against the wall and see if it sticks. And so you can do a video like, Mr. Beast, kind of crazy, wacky, very creative, very time consuming. And it might not work for you based on, your audience, your content. You can do a video where it's literally just, talking, showing what you're doing, and very minimal editing, and it could take off. And so that's kind of going to help you determine where you're going to go. And so like how you're going to gear your content. The creative part is, do I want to invest that time in creating a Mr. Beast type video, knowing that it's not performing as well? That's up to you, right? That's kind of you're your own creative director, so you get to determine that. But that time that you're putting in terms of like that creative investment, it's not necessarily going to turn into anything at the onset. But like from a creator background, I don't do things for the money. I do it to kind of share my story and to share what I'm doing with people, and hopefully help inspire them to do it too. So
Yeah. So the amount of time that you spend on your content that you create, and again, we're kind of pulling from the podcast that we talked about, with the thumbnail and then coming up with the title and storyboarding everything. I think it's lucky that you are a creative type, because that is kind of the drive and motivation to keep doing, because you're getting something from that you're not getting in the form of a YouTube paycheck. So I think the problem for some people are, if you're not necessarily that creative type, or if you are solely getting your drive from the amount of money, you might run into some issues long term.
yeah, and those are things I have to decide too. Like, I am a creative, but at the same time, I'm also a mom and I work full time. I'm a wife. I don't have, hours and hours to invest, each day to creating a video. And so I have to be very strategic about the videos that I do publish or that I do work on. And so work in that time, because that time takes away from my family
Mm-hmm.
or from work or whatever. And so, you know, I don't, that's why I don't do daily vlogs, or, you know, I don't do certain type of videos. The types of videos I do are the ones that I'm actually like excited about releasing. And
Right.
so I'm much more particular about those. Now, what Instagram and like TikTok allows you to do is create something quickly that's still kind of creative, and you're still kind of sharing a little bit of your story, but much more quickly.
Right.
And so YouTube is definitely different in that regard. Like you're creating long form content that you're wanting to either entertain or inform an audience.
Right.
Yeah. And so that's going to take a little more time.
Yeah, and then just to add to that, I also look at TikTok and Instagram with the reels and the TikToks,
Mhm.
in that you can do more of the long form stuff too, but that is also a lot of that, I believe, I relate it to going to the casino back in the days when we used to go to the casino. And I mean, we haven't been at the casino in I don't know how long because we don't have the money to do it. But it's one of those things to where it's that roulette wheel, or it's like spinning the, or it's the pulling the lever of your what are those things called, the
The slot
the
machines.
slot machines,
Yeah.
because any type of content you put out there with the least amount of effort, and it could just take off, and
Hmm.
you just sometimes you just don't know. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I mean that's interesting, and I do think that for those of us that are wanting to do YouTube, or starting it, or trying to develop something here on YouTube, getting a foothold here, you've got to have some other kind of motivation other than just seeing success in either money or
Mm.
subscribers, especially right off the bat.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I look at the lives that I do.
Yeah.
I mean, my God, if I went off of the people, if I went off of right now, and that's not to say that I'm not using the analytics, or I'm not open to information coming in that this isn't what people want to see. But my main drive right now with all of my content is about 95% of just shit that I want to do.
Yeah.
And but I also have to realize if that is what I am doing, then I also have to be prepared that there's not going to be very many people that are interested in that as much as I am, or the one other person that may get it. So I've got to make up my mind on what I want to do.
Yeah. And and you know, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's just a matter of like how much time you want to invest in that. And you know, you do see it as not necessarily a creative outlet, but a space to just, you know, be yourself. And again, nothing wrong with that. And so and you never know, there might be somebody out there that that resonates with. And so, you know, I think I heard one of the guys that I used to follow early on is he had just started sharing videos to be able to, because they made the move from California to North Carolina.
Right.
And so they started posting videos just so that their family back in LA could, you know, see what they were doing. That
Mm-hmm.
was it. That was the only reason. And, you know, it's so I compare that a lot to like what you're trying to do, and you're just doing what you think is fun. And at some point, his content started resonating with somebody, and then with another person, and then with more. And so you never really know, and you know who that audience is going to be, and how broad that audience is going to be. And
Right.
so, just the biggest thing that I've learned, at least in just the time that I've been doing it, is that you know Instagram gives you the freedom to just like share the pretty picture, you know, or the cool story, short story, whatever. YouTube gives you the opportunity to be yourself and to be authentic, and
Right.
people appreciate that, especially when you're looking at a platform that's probably the most watched thing over cable TV or satellite or whatever it is that people watch or stream. You know, YouTube is up there. And the reason that people are watching YouTube videos is because something either resonates with them, or, you know, it's interesting and engaging, and it's not fake for the most part. You know, there are things that are fake, obviously, but like, when you're watching gardeners and homesteaders, most of them aren't fake. They're sharing their story, and a lot of their failures and successes. And so that's one thing I appreciate about the platform. And I always try and do when I'm sharing content is just being authentic to the successes and the failures that, we have here. Because
Yeah,
it's not a romanticized thing. Oh, look at these pretty chickens, look at these pretty ducks. Well, what happens with animals is that sometimes you lose them, and sometimes you have predators, and so those things are hard, and sometimes it's hard to hit record when those things happen. But
right.
I told myself that I'd be authentic and sharing my story. And you know what? It sucks, and I'm going to tell you how it is.
Right.
So
Well, and
that
I do think most people that are craving to consume that type of content, being that it's as real and authentic as possible, um, they're, uh, for lack of a better term, bullshit meter. They can spot things that are kind of fake or not.
yeah.
And I do think that's why there's kind of this pushback on the Instagram trend of I don't know, maybe you had said this in the podcast, where Instagram at one point was people aspire to have things look like certain things.
Mm, yeah.
And, but there's just a point to where things just start to look kind of like, I mean, this is a little too fake, overly produced, not overly produced. There are some overly produced stuff, but just like, yeah, I'm not in it. I'm not
Yeah.
for this. It's just not, this isn't kind of a real person that I can touch and what you're kind of putting out there. But it's all, everybody does, and everybody consumes what they want to do.
Oh yeah.
And I totally get that. I know that's what you had said also in the podcast. So that kind of leads us to the next question here, and you touched on it a little bit. Do you prefer YouTube over Instagram? And we did talk a little bit about that in the podcast also. But can you go over maybe why you prefer one over the other, or perhaps you use one for something and then use the other for something else, and it's not necessarily a preference? Maybe it is. I don't know.
Yeah. And so, well, having come from YouTube, right? The goal was always to offer uh, a place or have a place where I could be myself, but also be that face where like there's a certain, audience that's kind of underrepresented on the platform
Hmm.
in our niche. And so, especially homesteading. And so I prefer YouTube in that way because it was my go-to platform. It still is. But much more so because I can actually dive deeper into a story where I don't have to write these long captions and, explain myself. I can just tell a story and share it in video format. And
Right.
I appreciate that about YouTube. Uh, I kind of fought the whole Instagram thing for a while, especially when they transitioned over to Reels, to
Hmm.
primarily Reels.
Hmm.
And but what Instagram's allowed me to do is to share those small moments that happen on the homestead. So that
Right.
happened with my ducks. Those are things that I value too. That I'm not necessarily going to show on YouTube or on a video because it's just a little snippet.
Right.
But Instagram lets you do that, and you can share a glimpse of that with people who are wanting that lifestyle. So it's just kind of adapting to the two different platforms and what they provide.
But overall, so yeah, I mean, I think I'm kind of the same way as well, in that there's certain aspects of content that I'm like, it does just work better whether I
Mhm.
produce it or consume it over on Instagram or TikTok. And then
Yeah.
there's just a completely different kind of content that I either want to produce or consume, it just goes better on YouTube.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
and that's kind of what I think I'm hearing from you as well. The next question, and I think you touched on this one just a little bit with your answer as far as the limited time that you have. Do you do any lives? How often do you do them? Or are you just not into them? Or it's just not part of what you're wanting to do? Or you just don't have time? You simply, with all the stuff going on the property and the kids and all that stuff.
Yeah. I have done lives in the past. I don't mind. I actually have thought about incorporating them more this year. I don't have like regularly scheduled lives. I have friends that do, and they do really well for them. I'm actually a moderator for a few of them. And so, you know, so it's actually kind of a fun experience from that perspective. But I have done lives in the past. And so I know a lot of YouTubers, at least in the homesteading niche. I can't speak to gardening, to just the gardening audience, but um, I know a lot of them will actually use lives if you have quite a bit of if you have a good foundational like audience.
Right.
Is they use that for to gain their watch time for monetization, and
Oh,
so
really? Oh, okay.
it's a really quick way to do that because with every like view that you have, you have a few right now that are watching. For everyone that's watching, that's the cumulatively that time of your life as well. So
And
right
that
now,
is towards.
right now you're at 31. We're at 31 minutes for this live stream, and you've
Mhm,
got 2 or 3 people watching
mhm,
intermittently, and so that's 60 minutes if you're just doing 2 people, right? If you have two viewers, and
hmm,
so it's a very quick way to get that watch time. Um, so we kind of call it a cheat in the in the creation circle,
sure.
but I mean, I'm not against doing lives as long as you're using it for the purpose of connecting with your audience or
But if the
talking with.
audience is tuning in and that's what they want to see, why is
Mhm.
it a cheat? You know what I'm saying? If
It's a cheat in that a lot of them rely on those lives for watch time because they're not you go and watch their or go check out their videos and their videos aren't getting very many views. So that's where that kind of phrase comes from, the cheat, where they're not actually putting the time in to create content that people want to watch. They just do lives.
interesting. Well, I mean, that's something I hadn't thought about because I'm like, I see so many people doing lives, like
Mm.
really pushing to do lives, and the only thing I can think of is, well, it's just another way of throwing the big net out into the water to fish or whatever, and to catch a different type of follower or listener, and then
Mhm.
also to engage with them a little differently or give them the opportunity to engage real time. Um, I don't know if
Yeah.
necessarily I would. I guess if I were in a little group around the campfire here of creatives, and if it's looked upon as kind of a cheat, I guess I would push back on that because I'm like, just because the other ways are making it hard for you to get the hours that you require or something, as long as you're putting forth the content that people are going to eat up. But I get what you're saying. I mean, I get what you're saying.
Yeah. No, and I think it's fair. I think both ways are ways that you can handle or ways you can approach it. The only reason that I don't do them as often is because I don't have time. And so, especially right now with my daughter's kind of busy schedule, so it's just hard to kind of work them in. But when I do have them, and when I was doing the lives, it was to engage with my audience because I want to be able to talk to them, in real time.
Right.
And there's very few times that you can do that, when you're a content creator. And I actually prefer the YouTube lives over like Instagram or, other things because you can actually see the chat and you can talk with people a lot more easily. Um, it is kind of more restrictive because you have to be kind of in a set place,
Right.
but I like that because it kind of puts you in the right frame of mind. You have to sit in a place and actually talk with people and connect. And so, when you have a guest over at your house, you're not watching TV and trying to talk to them at the same time, right? You're engaging with those people. And so that's what the YouTube lives allow you to do. And I think it's a lot harder to do on Instagram because you have a much smaller window and you can sometimes not see the chat very well. If you have a lot of people
Right.
in that
Right.
live, it's hard to see and answer questions. And so I never really liked Instagram lives because of that. But if that's your sole like platform, then that makes total sense if you're wanting to engage with your audience.
You mentioned 5 minutes ago that you're a moderator, maybe for a couple other lives for some people that some friends of yours, some other creatives. Like,
Yeah.
I can see you being like this big show producer, like behind the scenes and running a show. You just seem like just the demeanor. You're so kind of analytical and you're just kind of calm and reserved, and you just know how shit should be working. And boom, boom, boom. Let's do this. Okay, you've got the next guest coming on, and then we're going to do this. And I'm like, I can totally see you producing a big time Sirius XM radio show or something. You're like the Baba Booey or whatever.
That would be awesome. I kind of do that already at my job, but in terms of like the design work and project management. But that's what you have to do is kind of figure out what all the moving parts are and how they're going to work together and put them where they need to be so that they do.
So I just think, like, in a house fire, I want you to be in my house when my house is on fire to get me out, because I'd be freaking out. And you're just like, okay, let's get the all the stuff in the file cabinet. You guys grab the dogs, and then you guys go grab the photos, and then we're out of here. And meanwhile, I'm like, everything's on fire.
Well,
And
when we have we're in Missouri, right? We get crappy weather, and so whenever we have like bad stuff coming, I kind of herd everybody together, and we go downstairs into the basement, and go to our safe space, and make sure the girls have their shoes and all that.
Look how organized you are in a moment of disaster. Meanwhile, I'm like, I'm not even that. I don't have the foresight to make sure that everybody has their shoes. I'm like, well, let's finish our FIFA game first on the Xbox, then we'll go downstairs. You guys go down there. I'm gonna go outside and just look around in the clouds and see if I see the tornado coming.
That's Matt, yeah.
So,
But I think
go ahead.
that's just kind of a thing, though. Like, I am a creative and I do that at work, but at the same time, I'm also a mom. Like, moms just do that kind of stuff. Like, we think about all the things.
Yeah, not to generalize, but yes, I would agree that moms tend to think about everybody else. And again, not to generalize, but sometimes I fall on the whole thing of where I just kind of think about myself in times of trouble or fire or a tornado. I'm like, am I okay? Oh yeah, and I've got these other kids in here and family I have to take care of too.
Yeah.
So I want to hit another one of Amanda's questions, another good one. So, what are your financial goals when it comes to social media, YouTube in general? I mean, do you have
Yeah.
financial goals there that you've created? And whether or not you reach those, will that determine if you continue doing your channel?
Yeah. I mean, whether or not I reach them, yes, to answer that question. I mean, it's kind of a creative outlet for me now. In terms of like why I initially started it, that's all still there. It's still foundational to why I create content, but I also enjoy it and enjoy sharing stories. I really enjoy creating videos. So I've found a new kind of creative outlet in that regard. So I love editing, and which is kind of odd because everybody I've talked to in our circle, like everybody hates editing, and I'm like, man, it's fun. Like I really enjoy it. But yeah, I would totally still do it. Yeah. It all depends on what your goals are too. I mean, my ultimate goal is to share my story. Whether that makes money for me or not, that's a whole other thing. If it makes money for me, that's just kind of icing on the cake. And
So, do you
so,
really not have any financial goals then for YouTube?
no, the goal for me has always been to just, make enough to cover my feed costs for my animals
Right.
and to be able to buy seeds and materials to do what I need to do, but that's about it. Like, if I make more than that, that's great. Like, man, that's awesome.
How realistic is it from all the creatives that you know and these secret society meetings that you have with all the other creatives? Um, what percentage chance do you give to people? High percentage chance, low, almost zero, in actually making money doing this to where
So,
you know what I'm talking about.
right. Yeah. And so I think it's also, we're talking about like the financial stuff. I think it's important to note, and I think it's also a thing that you see on Instagram. So this is kind of one of the things where YouTube and Instagram kind of do having, one of the things that they have in common is that the majority of the money that you're making on those platforms doesn't come from those platforms. It's coming from uh, the opportunities to make uh, a like a side income. So a lot of the majority of the money, like the larger channels, the larger brands are making money from affiliates, um, sponsorships, and any partnerships that they have with other brands. And so they're not making the big bucks from YouTube, and they're not making the big bucks from Instagram. That's where they're making big bucks, is from those other three avenues. So, and apparel. So some people are making money off of their, selling their
Merch.
swag.
Right.
Yeah, their merch. Yeah. And so that's where the majority, like that's where the big money is coming from, not from the actual platforms themselves.
And for the average person, you think that's somewhat attainable, or are you like,
Yeah, I mean, I mean, Mr. Beast started out as just an average YouTuber. He wasn't great at the beginning, and so, but he was a constant learner. He was a
mhm.
student of YouTube, and now he is the cream of the crop. He's at the top,
He's
and
writing the rules
he is writing the
on
rules,
what
and so
you should be doing.
yeah, and yeah, and so you have to remember, like, everybody started as a nobody. There's very few people, and I think it's funny though, because when we're talking about the podcast, we're talking about the Kelsey brothers, we're talking about Joe Rogan and Howard Stern, and like these are brands, but there's other podcasts that started, where nobody knew who they were,
Right.
and we talk about them now, and you know, um, crap, I can't even think of the particular ones just because I haven't listened to them this week, but like there's people that have made a name for themselves, and so YouTube and Instagram are, are good opportunities for that, and TikTok obviously too. But yeah, I mean, there's
You know what?
money in it. There's
You know
money
what
in it,
blows
just
my
not
mind?
directly.
And these guys that I used to watch on YouTube, and I always thought that they were just kind of next door guys goofing off, and
Yeah.
things may have worked out for them a little bit to where they were able to make their set look a little nicer. And then I realized I saw an article the last couple of years that these are multimillionaires doing it. Those
Mhm.
two guys that do that Good Mythical Morning on YouTube.
Yeah.
And I'm like, are you kidding me? And it's their content is just kind of random and fun. Every time I just end up watching one of their videos that pop up, I don't subscribe to them, but whenever it pops up, there's always something that catches my eye, whether or not they're eating the comparing chicken sandwiches from all the fast food restaurants. And I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, I'm going to watch this till the end. And
Yeah.
it's just kind of mindless, but then I'm like super interested in it. And
Mhm.
then when I
Yeah.
read how much money they've made, I'm like, are you kidding me?
But that's because they've made it from the deals that they've made because of their exposure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's
That,
it's possible for anybody. I mean, that's a great thing about these platforms, is everybody has the ability to do that.
yeah, and it's something that I mean to have had this kind of opportunity with social media and pick whichever platform, whether it's podcasting, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and go back prior to, let's just say, 2020, or not 20, I'm sorry, the 2000, the year 2000, and being like some kid in the middle of Missouri, Cape Girardeau is where I come from, And how do I get out there and get known? I have to go physically go knock on a door. If there's a girl that I like, I have to actually go up and talk to her, which, yeah, right. But the opportunity to get out and to touch worldwide and to
Yeah.
have exposure and let people see you. And again, there's good and bad to all of that. You
Yeah.
know, it's something that you just, the opportunity is there to do something for really anybody that has access to the internet. And again, I'm taking for granted that everybody has high speed internet and has maybe a phone to record on and a laptop and things to edit on or whatever and all that stuff. But it's just kind of amazing that we can, find people from across the world and network and talk. And it when I sit down and think about it, it really does blow my mind.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. I think, did I tell you? Because I think we might have talked about it. Like, most of the friends and the people that I talk to, like on the daily basis, are the friends that I've made through the YouTube creator community. And so all of my homesteading friends. And so I talk to a few, like a handful of them almost daily,
Hmm.
more than my actual like face to face friends, which is
Right.
crazy.
Right.
Never would have thought. I mean, in 2000, that never be the case, right? Everything is face to face,
Yeah.
in real life. And so, but these are the people that get me, and that understand what my goals are, and they're going to be my biggest cheerleaders, and they're also going to be those people that understand like when crappy stuff happens. And so, you know, I don't know, it's kind of cool. It is really it's kind of amazing. Yeah.
It's just an opportunity to, like you're talking about, you can find really people that understand. There's a lot of people that are like you in the
Mhm.
world. And before, when we're kind of limited to who you see or who you go to school with or who you work with on a daily basis, and it's those 20, 30 people, 50 people. Now all of a sudden you're finding people in a pool of thousands.
Yeah. Yeah, there's going to be more people like you when you have a pool that size. Yeah.
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 And you find out that you maybe aren't so weird or different from everybody else, and you find other people that you're like, oh wow, we like running around with a chicken and a duck and doing all this stuff.
We get excited about when, the seedlings pop up and you're like, "Yes,
Yeah.
I've got germination. Woohoo."
So, well, I think you would be a brilliant show producer. The
Hey
way
man,
that,
if your podcast takes off and you ever need one, let me know.
well, I'm definitely going to have to, the one of the things that right off the bat, and you should have seen it when after we sat down and did our podcast, and I threw together a thumbnail, and before I went to actually put that up to show people, I was like, I can't do this thumbnail. I gotta put a little more effort into it. And I went back, and for me, I'm very proud of the thumbnail that I made for our particular episode, because I wanted to personalize it a little bit more to you and kind of the vibe that you have. And when people see that thumbnail, there's going to be certain things on it to where they're going to be like, that's Emma from her channel. That she says "Hola amigos," and that's her logo behind it. And just it forced me to kind of look at what I'm doing and say, okay, we can do just a little bit better. And
Yeah.
that's what I am in the back of my head for the last couple of weeks, and like everything that I'm doing, I'm like, okay, what would Emma do here in this situation? And I still I'm struggling. Like, I'll tell you, and we'll end the live here in about 5 minutes because I do have to get going.
Mhm.
But I struggle here. You tell me. I'm struggling with titles. right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Titles
let's
are
say on a
much.
clip, on
Mhm.
any clip that we put up there, let's say for this live, how would you help me title this live as a whole here when I put it up there?
Okay. So
So I'm
one
so
of the
bad at titles.
yeah, one of the thing, and I was for a long time too. I think they're coming more easily now, just having done them longer, and kind of understanding a little bit more about viewer expectation. Is that uh, I kind of removed anything. I think we talked about this, right? YouTube allows each video gives you that opportunity to kind of like really grow your channel and grow your audience.
Mm-hmm.
And so I look at each video as its own thing. And so I don't tie it back to something else unless I
Okay.
absolutely have to,
Okay.
in the title. So the title is going to be something that really has to be interesting to me.
So
But it
so help
also,
me with this in particular.
yeah. So, and it also has to be accurate, like in terms of like, if I click that thumbnail, are you going to tell me what this is about? Right? Is this going to
Okay.
be accurate? Or are you following through on what you promised? And so we're talking, this is a live, so we're going to want to touch on that. But the for this, I'd probably gear or work in something with it being about YouTube tips for Instagram uh, creators. So making that leap from Instagram to YouTube, or
Okay. So
helpful tips. If you're making that leap from Instagram to YouTube.
and that would be because knowing that probably most of the people that are going to be watching this, if I carry them over, they're coming from Instagram. Although I'm
Mhm,
also hoping that people will stumble on this on YouTube or
mhm.
whatever. But the people that are probably watching this right now are, I would guess, from Instagram. So you would tie this somewhat into helping those from Instagram create. Help me here. So
Yeah,
I'm seeing what you're saying. I'm seeing where we need to go here, but I want
yeah.
you to handhold all the way through. So what would your title be on this one for just this live?
Yeah, helpful tips to make the transition from Instagram to YouTube. You can even say something like helpful or creator tips or something like that. Like I'd have to think about it a little bit more,
Right.
but yeah, like that's kind of what I'm thinking in terms of like just you're throwing that at me. So this is kind of what's kind of running through my brain right now. So yeah,
Yes.
something
Like
about
like
helpful
explain
tips
to
or
me like
creator.
the wheels that are cranking in your head. Like what is the formula? You don't have
Yeah,
to tell me exactly right now, but like
yeah. Well, part of what we're doing, right? You're coming up with you're answering questions, but they're like tips on how to make that change
hmm
from Instagram to YouTube. And so that's kind of where I'm starting from, is kind of piecing those together. And
okay.
then, so that's kind of the basis. So you've got helpful tips from Instagram to YouTube. How do you make that interesting? So
Right.
use that as your foundation, and then figure out how can I make this interesting? Like if somebody's looking at that title, like create a thumbnail that's kind of cool, that's interesting. So that's one of your goals, is create a thumbnail that's gonna stand out in the sea of thumbnails on somebody's feed.
And so
And if you
you
get
would suggest that also, because I do
yeah,
that for each whole
hmm
episode of the podcast, but I don't do it for the clips and I don't do it for the lives really, just because I mean it is a lot of work. But are you telling me that I need to put in that work, thumbnails for the clips and the lives?
so if it's a short, no. If it's going to be a YouTube short, no.
Shorts,
Um,
no. Okay.
but if it's a horizontal video, if it's a full video or a long form video, it could be more than 2 minutes. Yes, you should do a thumbnail.
Oh boy. Now I'm gonna have to carve out. I I that it rationally, yeah, I understand that and I get that. And I'm gonna have to do it. I gotta pull up my big boy pants
And
and
those
I'm
are
gonna have to
and
do it on each one. Oh my
And
God.
again, that's one of those things you do have to consider when you're making that transition over, is like, Instagram, you don't have to really do that. You can just use something that you already have on your that's showing up in your feed, and you can just scroll to whatever it is that you want to use as your kind of leader for your reel. But
Right.
yeah, YouTube doesn't, you've got to stand out in that crowd.
All right. Well, then I'm going to have to come up with a whole new workflow. And this is all hard discussions that I have to have, and I got to quit whining and crying about stuff if I'm not willing to put in the work and effort that needs to be
Yeah.
done. And if you're telling me that I need thumbnails for each live and each clip, not the shorts, although I don't think you can make them for shorts. Shorts, I think it tells you you're stuck with whatever
Yeah,
the upload is going to give you.
you used to be able to, but they kind of got rid of that, and I totally get it, and I'm glad that they did, because that's less work.
And it encourages people just to throw the shit up there. I get it. But okay, I'm gonna come up with a workflow to where each one of my clips and the lives I'm gonna do a thumbnail for. And that may be, if that's at the expense of not doing as many, is that still the way to go? Don't do as many clips if just the thumbnail is the important thing?
Um, I mean, you can. I would definitely, just because of who I am, I couldn't do that. But yeah, I couldn't like put out content without an actual thumbnail that I worked on. But um, not everybody does that, and so
Right.
it just depends. Like if you've got the time to do it, do it. Um,
And it's
but
not a guarantee, right? It's not a guarantee that
no,
your stuff's going to be successful, but it's going to give you a better opportunity, chance
yeah.
for it to catch somebody's eye. I get it.
Like think about like old school, right? You have this like bulletin board and people are sticking stuff up there, right? Everything is kind of lost in there, but there's always one thing, like if you're looking at band posters or whatever, there's always going to be those that stand out the most to you.
Yeah.
So you've got to be that one that stands out, in that
Right.
feed. And so or on that bulletin board. And so you just got to think of it that way. How much do you really want to win at this? And
Yeah.
that's what it takes.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that you have to invest, hours and hours of time into creating a thumbnail. It just means you have to be more intentional about what that is.
And this is where your skill of being kind of a designer, and you can throw something that looks halfway. You're like, you can put in 10% effort and come up with something really kind of cool with very little effort on your end. And then here, I mean, it's so hard just because I'm not used to doing it, and I don't think I'm particularly good at it. But I guess at some point we get going on it, things get a little traction. Maybe I hire somebody out to do it, right? I don't
Yeah.
know.
Well, I mean, so do some research. I mean, that's what I do. If I'm doing a video on a particular topic, I actually go and do research on what exists on YouTube, and what kind of thumbnails people are putting out for those, and how long those videos are, and what kind of views they have. And so I look at the ones that are getting the most views and kind of see what's working for them. And so I do my research with all of the videos that I post, and so those and what those thumbnails look like. But I also look outside of my niche. I look and see what
Right.
other creators are doing outside of homesteading and and gardening. And so I don't necessarily want to do Mr. Beast style videos or
Right.
thumbnails, because my content is not like that. It's a little bit more heavily edited than, or heavily, that it's more edited obviously than a vlog.
Hmm.
So I can't just like do like a photographic still, but like, I still put in some time kind of in between those things. So,
Right.
but everything that I do on those is intentional. And so I've spent some time on those things. Not as much time as somebody else probably, but yeah.
But it's all relative, and there's going to be a bunch of
Mhm.
us coming from Instagram that aren't going to put in the time that you do, nor do we have the creative juice or the skill set to do it. But
Mm.
I'm gonna do so. I'm gonna put my feet to the fire, and then I'm going to go back, because that's the one thing. I correct me if I'm wrong. I can still go back to a bunch of the old videos, all my clips and lives, and just swap out and put in a new thumbnail when I get the time, right?
Yeah, you can do that with any video. So in fact, I would just find a template that works for you, or try and put one together that works, and then you can just kind of plug in guests as you do
Right.
it.
And
So
that's what I do with the
just to make
podcast
it easier.
thumbnails for the most part.
Yeah.
It's a template, and then
Mhm.
I get a couple headshots that may change out each week that real quickly I can throw in there. And
Yeah,
so
and
that
that's what I would do. Yeah.
okay. Well, again, you're playing chess with all this stuff, and I feel like I'm a checkers guy, but that's why I need to
Oh gosh, I'm
talk to
still in that
people like
transition.
you. But you would be the first to admit that you're always learning. Like you're always just,
Mm.
you're a sponge bringing in more information, and you understand this stuff. Whereas I have a hard time sometimes understanding what's right in front of me. So I need somebody like you to say, okay, this is kind of what you need to do. So that's what I'm going to do from here on out. At the very least, thumbnails on all of my lives and my clips, and then
Yeah.
go back and put those in there. So, well, I
Yeah.
appreciate you spending another hour with me today. This
Yeah,
was
anytime, man.
again super fun, and I'm not kidding when I say I do want to have a podcast with you on
Oh yeah, let's do it.
being a sport parent
Hmm.
and with
As an athlete, a former athlete.
a former athlete. And then I can only tell from my perspective of not being a former high level athlete, just a crazy dad that has spent way too much money on hockey,
Oh
and
gosh.
what we have both seen, and the good and bad, and maybe how crazy sport parents we are or that we're not. I don't know, but that will
Yeah,
be
they are
would
for
be
the
a great
most
one.
part.
That would be a great episode. So Emma, I
Yeah.
appreciate it, and
Yeah.
we are finished with the lives. Let me end the broadcast here real